Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Sadi Abdul Karim Sadi. I am giving about another 1 or 2 minutes for people to join. For those who are with us, welcome. We have a very fun lineup for you guys. We've got some great speakers and hopefully some great insight. And the topic of today will be building a resilient supply chain in a post-COVID world. We all know we don't have to bring too much attention to the fact that we're all right in the middle of a pandemic. And some of the unsung heroes in this pandemic that have been brought to light are the supply chain professionals, the people who are ensuring that medicines, that food, that supplies are uninterrupted, and the strain that they have come under due to a wealth of different issues that we're all experiencing. So I'm just going to give it another 30 seconds or so for those who are joining us as well. And just to remind you, my name is Sadi. I am the CEO for SlimStock, Middle East and Africa, inventory optimization experts. And with me on the call today, on the webinar, excuse me, I have Michael Badoui, who is also a supply chain expert, Chief Business Officer of Supply Chain Junction, very much experts in the world of supply chain, inventory, logistics, and also solutions providers for the supply chain world. We also have Tariq Abdelal, who is the Vice President for the Middle East and Africa at SlimStock, with myself. We have a little treat for you guys. Ziad Nabhani from Procter & Gamble. P&G are great partners, good friends. So really happy to have Ziad. Thank you, Ziad, for joining us today. So the process today, or the agenda that we're going to go through, is we're going to start off with two speakers. We've got Tariq Abdelal first, and then Michael Badoui, and then we're going to grab Ziad in for a nice interview process. Just some house rules. If you have any questions, please pop them in your chat through the application. We're going to collate all of these questions and try to get to them to you at the end. Also, always, please remember that you can reach either SlimStock professionals at slimstock.com or the supply chain professionals at supplychainscjunction.com. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Tariq Abdelal, who's going to be giving us some tips and tricks and issues about facing the coronavirus in supply chain.
Thank you, Sadi, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. Today, I will be talking about supply chain resilience during COVID, focusing specifically on the sourcing strategy, lessons learned, and what are the key tactics or strategies that can be taken to prepare supply chain against such major disruption. It's important to realize that the COVID-19 pandemic was not just a short-term crisis. It has a long-lasting implication on how people work and how supply chains function. There is a pressing need for businesses to build long-term resilience in their value chain for managing future challenges. Just to put some figures in the context, in a survey that was done a year ago, in the early stages of the COVID, on the Fortune 1000 companies, 94% of the companies at that time, they were seeing supply chain disruptions from COVID. 75% of them, they reported negative or strongly negative impact on their businesses. And 55% were actually have downgraded their growth outlook for the rest of the year. This shows the severity in such relatively early stage of the pandemic. I will quickly go through how different stakeholders of the supply chain impacted or were impacted by the pandemic. Starting from the end of the chain, which is the consumers. Consumers have been living uncertainty pertaining their job security, their salary cuts, etc. We witnessed heightened demand on specific product types. We noticed that social media has played a major role feeding information and the news that affected and shaped people's actions and opinions, whether they were authenticated or not. Consumers were more cautious on what to buy and how much to buy and where to spend. And also we have seen a major shift towards the online platforms, whether by force or by preference. But we know for sure that this will leave its marks on the way forward in the era post-COVID. Moving up in the supply chain to the retailers, we have noticed the impact on the sales up and down based on the categories. We have seen the pandemic stretching supply chain agility to the maximum by impacting, the disruptions that we've seen on the suppliers, on the logistics, on the distribution. We have seen also major and unprecedented, indeed, fluctuation of demand. Shift in demand from one channel to another, from one category to another, in a very rapid way. We were in a situation where no forecasting models were able to predict what's going to come. Moving up to the suppliers chain, shutting down suppliers fully or partially had directly had their ability to meet local and global demand. China, for example, they had to make calls on what to produce and for whom to produce based on different factors. They were themselves impacted by their own suppliers and their suppliers of their suppliers. So obviously, all aspects of the supply chain have been disrupted, and it was over a long period of time. Government was no absent from what's happening. They were very instrumental indeed. Government regulations were imposed throughout the pandemic on the movement of people and goods in an attempt to control the outbreak of COVID. Restrictions were made or sometimes imposed on non-essential goods. This has affected the plants, transportation, borders, creating surge of capacity limitations across the supply chain. Governments also started imposing certain policies pertaining vital products that are considered to be critical for the national security. So looking at the sourcing function, it's a call for change in the way procurement professionals look at their role. They should look to assess category strategies that balance cost and risk, starting from new product model, platform planning, to day-to-day procurement operations, leveraging technology to support rapid response and de-risk the impact on the business during such major disruptions. Let me share with you a bit of history for what had led to many supply chain failures. I think it's important to reflect on that. Over the past few decades, companies were excited by the concepts of low inventory, just-in-time delivery, single sourcing, centralization, and so on and so forth. They globalized their sourcing, production, and distribution operations, creating complex webs of interdependency between factories, warehouses, freight terminals, and shops around the world. No deny that these strategies have basically paid out at that time in terms of cost and cost profitability and maybe revenues. However, companies have increased at the same time their vulnerability of their supply chains to many different types of disruptions. The result was basically a surge of the number of failures that we have seen. I'd like to now move you to the concept of what kind of how companies typically define their sourcing strategy. Typically, companies would look at such a profile assessment tool where to basically define the strategy for each of their suppliers based on the revenue assessment, the revenue impact, and based on the number of sources that are available for each of their items to define what will be the supply risk. In this chart, you can see that single sources are classified as high risk, and of course for the high revenue impact, they are the high risk profile. And another good observation on this model is that 3 out of the 4 groups are they require 24/7 monitoring of your suppliers. That categorization that I just explained should not be news to many procurement professionals. However, the pandemic has highlighted the importance of a different angle. What procurement strategy potentially used to miss, or potentially might miss, is identifying the trade-off between the efficiency and the business continuity plan in the value creation process. This is not an easy decision. It involves incurring somehow higher costs to protect from an unforeseen disruption. Procurement team need to identify the sweet point that will achieve resilience and at a workable cost. That is basically a challenge. One other important factor I think it's important to highlight is the understanding of the suppliers during such difficult times. I'm listing a number of key questions, key areas where we need to pay attention to. For example, what is the ability of the supplier to operate? What is their material availability plan look like? Even their suppliers, tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, how are they able to meet demand? Not only me as a customer, but also other customers of theirs. What is their installed capacity? And this gives you an idea of their ability to absorb demand fluctuation. How do they define priorities? Is it by geography, by profit, by technology? How significant am I to this supplier? Am I going to be significant? Am I not? And finally, what is how do they define their recovery plan, and by when they will be, they can recover operations? Typically, what we have seen in the pandemic is that suppliers were focusing more, trying to focus more on maximizing productivity with the limitation that we talked about, the movement of goods and people. They were trying to improve or to maximize their productivity, reduce the changeovers, maybe prioritize certain markets over others based on certain factors such as profitability, logistics, cost, etc. This led to situations where some customers with certain, situations like SKU volume, profitability, geography, they were cut off from their supplies, at least on part of their portfolio. So this raises the importance of having close collaboration with suppliers to proactively align on the supply ability during major disruptions. So how do we define the collaboration, or what is needed? What are the pillars to define that constitute a collaboration between business and with their suppliers? I would identify like 6 areas of collaboration or 6 pillars of collaboration. It starts by identifying your own ABC. That is aligned by the business team or driven by the business requirement of your operations, and then push it upward in the supply chain to align the whole supply chain on those ABC. ABC, the A being the most important one, followed by the B, and followed by the C. The whole strategy of the company need to be defined and tailored based on the ABC classification. Then another area, we need to have a forum to establish, or like a kind of a joint crisis team with key suppliers to establish close communication, and that will allow them to basically start to have forums to review suppliers' capability in a periodic way. Another area of collaboration is where we work with suppliers to identify MOQs that are win-win situation between us and the suppliers. Identify clubbing SKUs demand together for this to be more productive for the suppliers, and so on and so forth. So sitting together operationally to see how we can help each other, that's basically what needs to happen in this specific point. Further to that, we need to understand, as a result of the collective understanding of the supplier's capability, what do I need to do in terms of revising my inventory coverage, which SKUs I need to cover more, because my supplier in such times will not be ready to produce that SKU as frequent as I would like it to be. And of course, identifying which SKU that cannot be supplied at the same time by the supplier during, which could be the C items in the ABC that we talked about. So in such case, the last basically area of collaboration internally is to modify the sales strategy that will tailor or to help the sales team drive demand on the right SKUs. So there is no point in driving sales on SKUs that we know that it cannot be supplied by the supplier. So that's basically, these are the areas, the 60 areas of collaboration that should help improving, building a streamlined communication internally and externally. The pandemic basically was a real test, as you can see, of the business continuity plan. In the next few slides, I will take you through the pillars. I would call that 5 pillars of that will shape or define the resilience of your supply chain, and specifically again in the sourcing strategy. The first one is creating transparency. This process involves determining the critical components of your operations, and then work with production personnel, identifying the ones that are sourced from high-risk areas, and at the same time they lack substitutes. With such a system in place, a company will be able to identify specific vulnerabilities across the multi-tier supply chain, and really, this really, in the case with the saying, the famous saying, forewarned is forearmed, applies, which means basically that prior knowledge of possible dangers or problems gives one tactical advantage. The second tactic, or the second pillar, is to develop a robust risk management process. And the reality is, post-COVID-19, the world will require that businesses can no longer depend on single sources anymore. In order to improve risk mitigation and avoid repeats of the issues we have seen in the past few months, redundancy and alternative options will have to become a feature of most supply chains. The third pillar is creating redundancy. And by redundancy here, I mean excess capacity and backups across the supply chain. The real challenge is to find the excess capacity is always, of course, a cost. So the real challenge is to find the right balance between lean, hyper-efficient supply chain that carries no fat, but is susceptible to unexpected shocks, and the sluggish, inefficient one that is maybe ultra resilient, but at the same time too expensive to maintain. So the balance here is crucial on the redundancy front. The fourth element is the shortening your supply chain. The pandemic has given momentum to what's called, and there is a term that has been, known by, which is gelocalization or globalization. And in this case, this globalization is opposite to the globalization term that marked basically the 90s. The globalization is basically suggests that you come up with a model of mixed supply chain design between globalization and localization. Many researchers believe that to boost the resilience of your supply chain, it's worth establishing production facilities with local sources of supply in each of your company's major markets. Not only it does spread the risk, but also it might have help on your cost. Company leaders will need to do the finances, of course, of this exercise to ensure that you serve the customers in the right way while you remain competitive in the market. The final one, or the final pillar, is to invest, taps into investing into collaborative, agile planning tools. Performing regular suppliers audit and measuring risks should be part of typically general business practice. But unfortunately, few companies have invested much time and money in this vital activity. Smart software procurement choices in areas such as business intelligence, risk assessment, data management will allow you to make predictive models for supply and demand in times of local or national or global uncertainty. Creating a collaborative network leveraging social media will tremendously enhance collaboration and responsiveness of suppliers, especially in the times of crisis. To sum up, in order to make it work, businesses will need greater visibility in their supply chain, and that requires basically ability to not only to have the data, access to the data early, but the ability to read it and process it and act on it to help decision makers. That's all for what I would plan to present to you today. I hope I was able to shed light on sourcing strategy as part of supply chain resilience. If you have any questions, please post them on and we'll be happy to answer the common ones. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that, Tariq. That was very insightful. There's a couple of main points that I took from that. really, you really expressed how COVID was a real test of supply chain resilience, supply chain effectiveness. And I take that you left the listeners with a focus that collaboration across the chain in the midst of a major disruption really requires visibility, alignment, seamless transfer of data, and effective communication. And obviously, I think you left it there with an understanding that supply chain technology is the foundational capability to achieving this resilience. So thank you very much for that, and it's always a pleasure. We have another great speaker for you, Michael Badwi, Chief Business Officer of Supply Chain Junction. That's www.scjunction.com. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Michael Badwi, the Chief Business Officer at Supply Chain Junction. I started Supply Chain Junction in 2002, and we've been operating in the Middle East and Africa since then, servicing over 90 live customers and sites that we've worked from a supply chain software deployment perspective and a supply chain consulting perspective. So really excited to be here today, and I guess really excited to talk about what I've seen come out of COVID from a supply chain resilience perspective, how we're seeing some of our customers adopt some of these processes, and some of the tactics and techniques that are available for you to consider, as you start to, I'd use the word get back to business as normal, but it's probably not going to be like that anymore. There's certainly going to be different channels that you need to service and different customer expectations. So I'd like to really cover off a couple of things here, and the first one is just really, the first part is what we've learned through the pandemic, and what we've seen as an evolution, over the past sort of 20 odd years that I've been working in the industry. So, one of the key themes I'm going to talk about today is really about omnichannel and the fulfillment and I guess customer satisfaction around omnichannel, because I think everybody who's listening to us today would completely appreciate that through COVID, the acceleration of the requirement for people, shopping at home and fulfillment to home or to their place of work, if they could go to work and so forth, accelerated significantly. So, in the early 2000s, we really saw a disconnected multi-channel shopping experience. Sure, the internet was getting up and running, and sure, there was some hype and so forth around that, but most retailers, wholesalers, distributors, and so forth really just had a disconnected approach to that. And that went on for about 10 or so years, really. Then in the early sort of 2010s, some of the places around the world started to implement things like ship from store, buy online, pick up in store, and we saw the rise of social media. So really more adoption, again, stronger adoption of using things like apps and the internet and so forth. We then really started to see, sort of mid to the back end of the 2010s, this whole concept of omni-channel. And that was probably a little bit confusing to everybody in the beginning, because really retail is retail, whether you're buying, from a store, whether you're buying online, whether you're using your phone, you're using a kiosk, whatever it is. But the important part there was really the full understanding of your customer and their expectations. We move to today and we see the terms unified commerce and hyper-digitalization. I think if you say those in any real supply chain meeting, you might get some smiles and nods, as those are the important buzzwords today. But really, the thing about that is about having a single view of the customer, single view of inventory, and the ability to service them from anywhere. So things have changed a lot over the past 20 years, and really got accelerated in the past sort of 10, 12 months. So as we move to the next slide, just make sure I can move to the next slide. What that's really meant for us is that companies must adapt and survive. And look, some of the companies that we and our partners work with have seen anywhere from a 40 to 120% online sales growth in 2020. And of course, that was fueled by COVID. But I think the foundations were there. And the challenge for those companies is, well, with such massive spikes in a specific channel of delivery, how do you actually deal with that? So they and us and the partners that we work with have tried to understand, well, what's the common thread here? What's really been driving all of this stuff? So really, those who have been successful are those brands that really have unified or single stock visibility and the ability to fulfill from stores. So what we saw in COVID and we see now out of COVID is that any inventory should be available for sale wherever it is to whichever customer you have, whether that be an end retail customer, a wholesale customer, whether you're a distribution company, that sort of thing. So you should be able to sell that from your warehouse, from your stores if you're a retailer, even if it's on the water from your suppliers, or even if you've in the process of ordering it from your suppliers. But specifically when you look at stores, we've seen that revenue growth can grow as high as 114% when click and collect is implemented, and as high as 60% when when you're doing a ship from store. Obviously with click and collect, there's also been the advent of curbside pickup, but when you get people into stores as well, that really helps for a store sales uplift. So COVID made that transition critical. I mean, these are numbers that came from people like Adobe and McKinsey, but really, through the early days of the pandemic, 200+% increase in the number of orders placed online and picked up at brick and mortar stores. If you're in the US, where most of these stats come from, through the course of the pandemic, 70+% of people have tried new brands, new places to shop. I mean, people were just at home, they were bored, they had to do something. They obviously had to buy things as well, but they were getting the taste for this and they're moving towards basically a different way of interacting with the brands that they normally liaise with. So what we saw here is that store fulfillment became a critical aspect of this. We saw, through our partners, Manhattan Associates and some of the other companies that we work with, that 60% of digital revenue involves some sort of store fulfillment. And a lot of these companies that we deal with around the world, they had in the mid to high 20% of their revenue come from digital orders. And depending on where you are in the world, that's developing, and we see that that number being smaller in the Middle East, and we don't have hard facts on that, but it's certainly a number that's growing. And that's really split into the 4 areas here. So, retailers and wholesalers are still fulfilling, omni-channel e-commerce orders out of their DCs. There's been a huge increase in BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. There's been a huge increase in local deliveries from store, and then there's been a huge increase in ship from store. That ability to really get that inventory from anywhere in your network has really helped a lot of these retailers, wholesalers, and distributors, keep surviving through the pandemic, and many of them even growing. So, the delivery and pickup experience has significantly evolved over time, and is really seen a change in consumer behavior, so much so that what we see people looking for now is show me if a product is in stock or available before I even want to think about it. Help me compare prices or reviews, and just make it easier for me to find a product or location that's either near to me, or you can ship to me, or is suitable for me, whatever it is. Really, the power is being continually shifted to the consumer, such that they really are the ones who are in the driving seat now, and we as the people who need to help them really need to make that easy for them. So to that, we really see their expectations changing a lot and rising. So some statistics from various companies here, and you can see the credits at the bottom. 74% of people now really want to see what are all the delivery options available to them, which is clearly obvious, because if you can wait 2 or 3 days and don't have to pay for something, fantastic. But if you want it in the next 4 hours and need to pay for it, okay, great. But show me those options. Show me what that means to me. 50% of people are using abandoned carts because of unsatisfactory delivery options. Well, they can't make it in the time frame. They can't deliver to where you are. Specific things like that. So you really want to make sure that you overcome that. Nearly 40% of people expect free 2-day shipping. That's really become the norm now. I mean, if you can't get something for free in 2 days, or even 1 day, a lot of people are having that expectation, and people they're just not interested. So those expectations are really changing and continuing to be rising. So, you know, consumers are expecting all the brands that they deal with also to deliver a really, really excellent post-purchase experience. So they want personalized communications regarding their transactions. So they want to log in, they want to see their purchase history. They want, you know, consumer, the branded self-service tasks that can save the consumer's time. So whether it be returns, you know, whether it be credit queries, whatever it might be. And, you know, they really want a seamless transition between a self-service process and an associate if they have to go into a store that assists them in the channel. They don't want to be working with 3 and 4 systems. Anybody who's ever had to return something into a store that you bought online, and there's, you know, you have to deal with 2 different associates and 3 different pieces of, you know, kit in the store, will completely understand why people don't want to do that. Of course, now there's the new shopper, the new expectations. People want to be able to just very quickly understand, where's my order? What if I'm not going to be where I said I'd like you to ship it to? What if I want to change the way I want to pay for it? What if I want to cancel or amend it? How about returns? How about if I want to add something to it, or get a discount that I've picked up in a store or something along those lines? How about if I said to you, deliver between 2 and 3, but can you deliver between 2 and 4? What about if I want to buy it again? I mean, these are all sorts of things that people are talking about and needing now, and it's just becoming the norm. And really, you know, we have to be able to support those processes. So how do we support those processes, and what do we see the top strategic priorities of omni-channel companies being, you know, nowadays, especially post-COVID? You know, there's a large percentage want to really transform their stores. They really want to be digital advisors, you know, because, you know, either when you're in a store or when you're shopping online or when you're looking at your phone, they really want to give that information available. They want to add fulfillment choices to their customers. They want to have customer-facing mobile initiatives. The critical thing here, and even though it's 20%, is master data management, integrated management. They want to have all of that data available in a single place. They want customer analytics. They want to understand what's happening with their consumers, what the buying patterns are, what's important to them, what they do when they shop and through the channels that they shop. They obviously want to make it safe and secure. They want to, you know, make sure that their omni-channel or online channel experience is modern. Consumers expect that nowadays. They expect a fresh, clean, easy to use experience, and then they want a very flexible and fast fulfillment process. So if you're out there thinking about, you know, strategic priorities, and 1 or 2 or 3 of these fits into what you've been thinking about, then you're not alone. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm just going to talk about some of the tactics you need to think about to really meet these changing consumer needs. So firstly, the most important thing is keep your customer promise. If you say you're going to deliver on Tuesday at 2 p.m., you know, ensure that you do that. Now, how do you do that? You need to do it through 2 real ways. The first is through inventory visibility, and the second is through allocation and order orchestration. So inventory visibility, you know, and these are industry terms that are coming out there, you know, things like unified inventory visibility. What does that mean? That means a real-time view of physical inventory across warehouses, at your 3PLs, what's in transit, what's at your suppliers, what's in your stores. Then, you know, views that enable you to really leverage those. So, you know, different rule sets and criterias that allow you to build out your business rules that help you make that available, that inventory available to your consumers when they need it in a profitable and effective way for you as a business. From an allocation and orchestration perspective, what you really need to be thinking about here is, how do you optimally fulfill those orders from sometimes hundreds, sometimes potentially thousands of points, whether they be stores, drop ship centers, whatever they may be. But not just that, you need to be able to do those in a way that does it profitably for you and meets the customer service expectation. And then what you really want to do is the ability to have a single place where you can orchestrate all of those orders, whether they be, you know, returns, buy online, pick up in store, whether there's inventory at 5 different stores for a single customer order and some of it in the distribution center. You really want the ability to orchestrate that and present to the customer the best possible option for them. Because the truth is, if you can't see it, or the customer can't see it, more importantly, or you can't provide the information to the customer to see it, then you're not going to be able to sell it. So how do you turn this visibility, this stock visibility, truly into available inventory to sell? You basically ensure that you have all of your inventory availability and order promise processes throughout all of your systems. And these are the core layers that you have. So the consumer touch points, whatever they may be, store, web, mobile, whatever, the APIs into the specific solutions that you have, and then that inventory, enterprise inventory visibility across your vendors, your distribution centers, and your stores. So what does that kind of look like in a practical example? So at the bottom here, I've got the truck with the in transit. I've got the multi-channel distribution center. I've got the third-party logistics fulfillment center. I've got a couple of stores, and I've got a dropship vendor. And there I can, and in the second row, I can see the different pieces or quantities of inventory that's available. And I can see in the third row there, as I build that up a little bit further, future supply and on-hand supply. And then what I present to the customer is total supply. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking out there, okay, great. That's not always going to be the case. And I want to protect some inventory in store and so forth. Absolutely. And that comes back to some of the business rules and the logic that you build. But this is the core concept of servicing that enterprise inventory visibility to your end customers. So, also you probably have to think about things like virtual inventory segmentation. So for those of you who work in warehouses and use warehouse management systems and potentially order management systems, in the early days, you used to have a separate e-commerce warehouse or at a minimum, separate aisles for e-commerce inventory. You might have even had the same for wholesale and for retail. Today, you shouldn't really be doing that at all. You should have those things in one distribution center with the ability to manage that inventory, virtually, and then have the processes to actually move that inventory through the facilities and the channels as required. And that's really driven by, the best-in-class order management systems out there today, supported by warehouse management systems. So the other thing that's really important is that, you need to involve your contact center. You need the ability for not only your associates to understand your customer relationships, but when your customers are engaging with issues or questions or so forth, that they can be sure that there's not going to be a complex process which will just frustrate the life out of them when dealing with you if they're doing it on the phone, email, social media, whatever it may be. So you really need to think about how you're looping that into your chain. And then I guess finally, the post-purchase activities, you really need to make this easy for your customer. So whether that be the branded app, transactional, emails updating and, text messages updating what's happening, tracking of packages, your curbside processes, your self-service returns, how you manage your payment processes, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things to think about there. And those are all available today in commercially available software and so forth. And obviously, you can talk to us and we'll be able to help you through that journey. But I hope that today you found this interesting and informative, and I'll be very happy to take questions from you.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was fantastic. Really, what a way to capture what's actually happening in the world. And you are very, very, very right. The customer is everything. Their journey is everything. Omni-channel, e-commerce, growing significantly. COVID definitely accelerated the shift and forced companies to adapt. Again, I can't say, it seems to be a resounding theme today: visibility, visibility, visibility. Thank you for also putting that point forward, Michael. It's very important. Agility also is what I took from what you said. The agility to be able to sell, to return from anywhere, in store, from your DC, inventory in transit, really with the goal of ensuring that your customer experience when shopping is the key, almost essential ingredient to the success of your business. So help them to shop the way they want to, right? And make it, really adapt your business to how they are purchasing. All right, okay, so thank you very much for that, Michael. Look forward to hearing back from you in a few more minutes. Just before I bring in Ziad Nabhani, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about SlimStock and Supply Chain Junction's collaboration, our partnership. It's a strong one. We're both in the supply chain solutions phase. SlimStock is an inventory optimization software provider, also consultancy, and Supply Chain Junction is a supply chain consultancy with a focus on solutions, primarily experts in the world of WMS, warehouse management systems, with some fantastic partnerships, namely Manhattan Associates. Now, as you can imagine, SlimStock does what you need in your warehouse, and SC Junction does where to put it in your warehouse and what the visibility along the chain is. And really, we're talking about visibility, we're talking about alignment. Data is the key. So somebody who knows very much about data, I'm going to be introducing Ziad Nabhani, who is the Transport Warehouse and Logistics Group Director for Massive Region, India, Middle East, and Africa region at Procter & Gamble. 16 years at P&G, Ziad. Thank you so much for having for being here. Procter & Gamble and SlimStock have a fantastic partnership, and so thank you for being here with us. So question for you, Ziad. First of all, how about we start by you giving an introduction to yourself? We all know you, but let's introduce you to the world. Ziad Nabhani.
Thank you, Sadi, and the team for the opportunity to engage and share a bit about what we've seen and the experiences we've had. So let me tell you a bit more about my background. So as I said, more than 15 years with Procter & Gamble, almost half of it in logistics, but I started earlier on in manufacturing operations, and then moved on to the whole planning space on different fronts, including demand planning. So you can say I've moved from complaining about the forecasts and the trends to actually putting in that forecast, and now and for a while now dealing extensively with the challenges of logistics. I mean, you all know supply chain is never an easy area. It's always fluctuating between excess stock or out of stock. But with the recent developments, with the challenges we've seen on COVID, I mean, it just takes to the next level and makes it even more exciting and thrilling to do. Apologies, Sadi, I can't hear you.
Apologies. Thanks, Ziad. Thank you so much for that. I was going to say, what a wealth of experience. And you thought you had seen it all until the pandemic came, and now there's a whole new thing for you guys to experience. So, I picked up on your roles as demand manager, and so in your previous roles as Middle East and Africa demand managers, elaborate a little bit more on how segmentation, ABC, if you will, is determined at Procter & Gamble. And I imagine that creates some focus within your SKUs. And how do you align that down your stream? Because you have such a long chain from top to bottom. And as Michael mentioned, the customer experience is everything. So ensuring that the products get into their hands. So have a crack at that question, buddy.
So very, very interesting perspective. So I mean, you understand that I mean, it's all about information. Ultimately, this is the name of the game. The reality is, while you wish to do everything, protect every SKU and every customer and every channel all the time, reality is your resources are always fixed and limited, at least in the short term. So the ability to react is all a function of the information you have. So one aspect of it is making sure that you're able to react to this information, so that across the entire digital chain, you're aware of the demand signal and how it reflects and amplifies all the way up to even the raw pack material base starting materials. So this is one piece, which is, does the signal flow through? And the other one, which is more the area of expertise of demand planners in general, is, doing this sensing and identifying exactly what's the customer signal. So we give a lot of thought and resources on identifying that, whether it is the actual demand planners, whether it's the tools and the platforms that we use, and obviously talking to and integrating with sales counterparts, distributor counterparts, and even customers as well. So this is obviously the fundamental. But even beyond that, again, when you say I want to get the demand signal, I want to get it right, you have a wide range of SKUs. On some categories it's in the thousands. So on what do you really work? And interestingly enough, while the immediate reaction might be, okay, let me go talk about the bigger business drivers, the top selling SKUs. But in reality, your costs and your resources are tied down usually by the smaller ones. The long fat tail of underperforming, underselling SKUs, and so on. So what do? We come and define a different segment, what we call segmentation, to group these SKUs based on their role they play in the portfolio and the behavior they have in terms of demand consumptions. So you have obviously the top movers. That's straightforward. You also have the strategic ones, which could be things like new SKU launches or promotion SKUs, which are happening specifically in this period of month or week of sales, where this is crucial. And then you also have the non-strategic things that you're trying to phase out, but you can't because you actually have inventory. So you define the different segmentation or group of SKUs, and then you define your operating strategy and how you're going to handle each of these families. Again, as we said, you can't protect everything. You have to make choices. And this is where you come and say, okay, I want to carry more raw pack material on these SKUs. I want to carry less of those. I want to carry the inventory closer to the selling point, or I want to carry the inventory further upstream, because my ability to forecast is limited. So this is the optimization you probably start to go through as a demand planner and a forecaster, and it's really quite deep, because the initial reaction is, okay, I know the business drivers.
I can't help but hear a theme here, Ziad. I'm telling you, there's a theme that we're building. It looks like, if I understand what you're saying, it's segmenting within the segmentation. So it's taking a look at the principal ways of looking at focus, right? As you said, your top sellers, your underperformer, but then also segmenting within those groups to create focus areas. So maybe looking at it on order lines, looking at it on frequency, on volatility, on different from different angles. So I really appreciate that. That is sound advice for all of our listeners. There is, don't stop at only the first segmentation. Segment within it to create further focus. But back to our theme, I'm telling you, visibility, you need data for all of this, right? And you said modern tools are I would say the foundational, as Tariq said, the foundational capability in building this resilience that we are talking about, that the pre-COVID understanding of the demand patterns, but being able to also then adapt to, as Michael was saying, to the new world. We need data. We need to be able to visualize this, and then we need to be able to segment and focus throughout it. So thank you so much for those words of wisdom. And for those of you guys listening, that is, if you want to find cash, that's how you find cash, right there. Focus, 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 get your data right, get your data correct, and then you can analyze. And then, as Ziad said, at some point you need to make a human decision, but at least you're making a human decision based off of data, off of the facts, right? So fantastic one. All right, I'm going to give you another one here, all right, because I really like that first one, Ziad. Thank you for that. So in your current role now, of course, it's a much expanded role, and taking on the real hard stuff. So planning all in the tools and all that kind of stuff, that's all good, but at some point we need to execute, right? And then somebody needs to be in charge of the execution of all of this. So your new role, I imagine that fulfillment is the name of the game. Where does P&G stand on fulfillment, on the capability of this fulfillment, pre-COVID, post-COVID? And let's make it a little spicier by focusing on emerging markets, right? The emerging markets are always, the hardest ones to get to. Tell us a little bit about what you guys' strategy was pre-COVID. Has the strategy changed? And how are you building up, if you are building up at all, your capability into the region and other emerging regions?
Sure, very clear. Thanks again. So okay, let's talk a bit about what we've been doing to address fulfillment pre-COVID, and then how that has changed post-COVID. So in reality, everyone understands the need to have data visibility to have better reaction times. So in the era pre-COVID, you kind of knew where are your weakest links, and you're trying to build those, connect those pipes and build those bridges across the different stakeholders in the supply value chain to enable this data to flow and get that visibility. Now, obviously, it's with various levels of success. You can't say that you've done it everywhere, but at least the problem you're trying to define was kind of very, very clear. What happens with COVID is there's a lot of I want to call it disturbance instead of disruption. Disruption is usually something that is groundbreaking, and you trigger it and initiate it, and it kind of changes the game. But disturbance is where everything that you can go wrong goes wrong. Things that you never thought have to worry about, you start to worry about, like ports shut down and sites can't get delivered and so on. So reality is you don't know what you don't know. Immediate reaction was, okay, demand's gonna drop. We're gonna need less inventory, or we're gonna need more inventory in the short term because people are gonna stock up. So, and this is all based on speculation, assumption. What we experienced in P&G is quite the opposite. That the demand has shot up, and it was a fantastic growth spur. And logistically, we weren't really prepared for it. So we went ahead in some regions and invested even more heavily. And it's not just in carrying more inventory and so on, but it's all in our ability to fulfill, to go direct to customers and consumers. So what do we do now post-COVID? So post-COVID, or as we are evolving into the better norm, let's call it.
The new norm, yeah.
We like to call it the better norm in P&G because we have to make it a better. I mean, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. So what we're trying to do, look, we have to step in where we couldn't in the past bridge that basic requirement of information flow. We are stepping in. In the operational sites, it's a reality. You have to do more automation, more digitization. You can't continue to depend on scores and numbers of people of labor. Also, where you have a limitation in terms of whether it's your distributor capability or your contract manufacturing capability, you have to step in and take it over. You have to go direct to the customers. You have to go, localize your suppliers, or bringing things in house. You have to step in and bridge that gap, because where you had the luxury of time in the past, okay, we'll address this eventually, and we'll go by order prioritization today. You can't afford to be vulnerable at any point in the supply chain.
You know what? Vulnerability was definitely something that COVID exposed in your supply chain. I mean, if you had, no matter how great a plan that you have, something that is as disruptive as you would say, and the disruptions are coming from everywhere. You can typically you plan worst case scenarios by area, but if there's disruptions all across, being nimble is the name of the game, right? As being the one that can react the first, that can react with can test different scenarios and try. And I think that also kind of brings in, you mentioned your suppliers, the collaboration between, your distributors down the chain, the collaboration between yourselves, the manufacturing plants, your partners, really the stakeholders is really the one of the most key, from what I hear, parts of being able to react to such disruptions, especially when they're flying in from everywhere, right? And so, well, congratulations that you guys are having I don't know where you are in your calendar year, but you guys had a good year. If you've closed off the year yet, it is good to hear, that you were able to meet that demand, that the demand was there, but that you were able to meet that and ensure that experience to your end users, and customers, I should say. So big congratulations to that. It's an absolute honor to have you here, Ziad. You guys are really dear to our heart. It's a pleasure to be working with you guys. So, and really, thank you. What great insights from you. But stay on with us, because we've got some questions that have come through from the audience. So I will sure that we're going to need that experience from you. But at this time, I'm going to ask my colleagues, Michael Badwi and Tariq Abdul-Al, to join us. And let's open this up. Hey guys, how you guys doing? Yeah, thank you so much for that. Really, absolutely fantastic. Michael, really, it was, I really found that was a very great breakdown of what's happening in the world today from the eyes of the people who are really making the demand, right? These are the guys that are creating our problems that all of us supply chain guys are trying to solve, and they're moving from buying online to tomorrow they're going to want to be clicking and collecting. And have they changed? Is this the new norm? What's happening? Is everybody going to go back to the malls again? Who knows, right? So just being there to be able to fulfill that. And actually that ties me in perfectly with one of the questions that have come through from the audience. And one of the issues that they're experiencing, I believe this person is from a multinational, and they're up the chain, they're manufacturers, but I imagine they're working with their distributors in multiple different regions. I'm going to keep the names confidential, because I really haven't spoken to lawyers about whether or not we can do that. No, so Michael, I'm going to give the first one to you, right? The issue here that the person is experiencing is getting their goods to their multiple partners, and specifically in Africa, but also having the ability to keep their costs low when prices are surging. So the question seems to encompass what the actual issues are, for example, on emerging markets in Africa, that prices of their partners are going all over the place, that they are experiencing these, as Ziad says, disruptions that are coming from all level. And I think the question, I'm going to rephrase it to ask it to you in, what can they do from a central perspective, right? To monitor and to then make adjustments on what is happening down the chain with their partners, whether it is supply interruptions from the top, whether it is increases in logistics prices, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so Sadi, thanks for asking me an easy question. Yeah, well, I might make this webinar go very, very long if I give you a heavily detailed answer. But I mean, it's an interesting one, because certainly in Africa, less so than our experiences in the Middle East, you know, the currencies are completely unstable, right? And there's inflation, and you know that's a complex thing just to deal with your trading partners and your delivery and distribution partners. In those regards, the amount of time spent in negotiation around those is quite vast. But I mean, what we've seen in terms of supply through those sporadic types of you know, situations that go on all the time really is the ability for the central manufacturing areas, wherever they may be, to try to produce to demand. You know, obviously you have the safety stock and so forth that you need to have, the stuff that you're always selling, you know, through in volumes, but perhaps shorter, faster delivery runs, which then leads into the old question of, okay, well, does that increase my logistics cost and my service cost? So all of those trade-offs need to be considered in that servicing process. And yeah, I'm not sure who exactly asked that question, but
I'm hearing it also on the same theme here again, Michael, that the ability to be able to run scenarios off the cuff, right, as you're, you know, as you're summarizing, is I think one of the key things that would, I would imagine, assist you in making the correct decision, whether it is a disruption from your supplier, you know, sharing that information with your partners ahead of time, that in a seamless way, you know, some kind of an alert system, or sharing data on a weekly basis, what your capacities are. You know, I mean, you guys are experts in capacity, and ensuring that capacity is visualized. So tell me a little bit about how modern tools allow you to visualize that capacity and ensure that you're able to you know, share that information with your stakeholders.
Yeah, so I mean, there's an important word here, which is collaboration, right? So you've got to give all of those people in your chain access to the information that's relevant to them. And you know, the modern software tools nowadays make that very easy just through web interfaces, but that's the easy part. The important part is around the definition of the business rules and the constraint-based calculations and the profitability, the lead times, you know, the minimum stock levels, all of those sort of things, which in the end are all relative to what you want your customer service to look like, right? And obviously there's the profitability trade-off there. So you know, a lot of the modern software that we work with, and I sound like an old man when I say modern software, but you know, software that's commercially available today, you know, it can do that for you. And you know, whether it's the planning systems, whether it's the order management systems, the transportation systems, you know, you surfacing that data, making it available to your partners and collaboratively working with them won't entirely solve that kind of problem, but it will help a lot.
Agreed. I think we'd probably all be in agreement, at least from what we've all been hearing today. Thanks so much for that, Michael. And for the person asking that question, we hope that was also useful for you. Just to sum it up to you, we understand your pains. You're not in this alone. Supply chains all across emerging markets have been heavily disrupted. You know, have faith, invest in tools to give you the visibility, share that information with your stakeholders, and also don't be afraid to do a what if scenario. So what if this, and what if that, and what if this, and then use your human judgment on top of the data that you are having in order to make the best judgment. At the end of the day, we live in a world where you know, we only typically really find out the real result much after we've made the decision. So you've got to use your experience, but really use your data as well to answer those. So great question. Thank you very much. I'm going to bring another question over here. We have a question from a manufacturing business in the Gulf. And the question is, how do you monitor your lead time and your pricing And are there some logic or is there some rules that you can apply to safeguard yourself against these disruptions in lead times and disruption in pricing? So I'm going to ask that question to Tariq.
All right, so that's a good question indeed. So basically, I would go back to the fluctuation on lead time, the fluctuation on pricing, and the fluctuation even on the performance of the carriers. We have seen all of that through the pandemic. I believe that again it falls back into what is the basic capability that allows you and allows everyone to spot this and react and allow the system to react. Remember how we're talking about so many SKUs and so many suppliers and so many even delivery locations that we are handling. Counting on people to keep an eye on all of those factors is kind of nearly impossible. So I go back to the basic basically capability, which is to answer your question simply, it all requires a level of digitization in your supply chain that allows you basically to address all of these points. Today's solution, there are so many solutions out there, and they tackle all the points and even more that you mentioned. It allows the person sitting in front of the screen basically to have an oversight on the end-to-end supply chain, and to within almost immediately the system will flag all these kind of outliers or deviation from in the operations, and how, especially when it comes to affecting your availability in the market. And then for the user to pick up the phone and react by talking to suppliers, talking to the couriers, and or within the organization to coordinate a mitigation plan. So I believe it all starts with your ability, your capability from system point of view, to have the information available for the users. That's where I want to start. And if that is available, the solutions do provide all the answers that you're looking for. In a short.
We're back at it again. Visibility, agility. Thank you so much for that, Tariq. I couldn't agree with you more that the visibility and well, it really stems from data as well. Having the data that can then be visualized in a way that makes sense for you will allow you to get to those decisions. And then putting on some logic on top of that, some business rules would assist you. Whether it's on the performance of the lead times, whether it's on pricing from up the chain or down the chain, or whatever it may be. So thank you so much for that. All right, we have one more question. I'm going to open this one to Ziad Nabhani. The question comes from a retailer, quite a large retailer, actually. To be specific, it's a food retailer, right? An international one. And the real, this wasn't a question, but it was a topic that they wanted to discuss. Obviously, they're having some issues with their suppliers' availability. And they have forecasted their demand, right? But the forecast isn't coming up the chain, and therefore, or they're not being able to react fast enough. So they're experiencing issues down there to their customers, right? As a retailer, they're the ones who get the products in the hands. So I actually imagine this is an account of yours. I don't imagine you are the supplier that has the availability issues, as I know I work with you guys, and that is part of our KPIs. So talk to me a little bit about how the suppliers are managing the availability, yourselves, the suppliers, that is. And are there any tips and tricks for people who are forecasting or not forecasting their existing demand? And so, yeah, talk to us a little bit about that relationship between the supplier and the distributor, or the distributor and the retailer, all right?
Okay, I think now you can hear me. Yes. All right, very good. Again, it depends. Are we talking about like a short-term challenge to meet the demand, or is it more of a chronic issue in like categories that are quite difficult to forecast? So really, I mean, when you talk about, let's assume this is about a short-term situation. It's not so much the traditional business continuity planning where you need to be ready with backup sourcing points and so on. It's more towards like what choices you want to make to choose what you want to protect. So, okay, I will be exposed in the short term, but I don't want to be exposed on the most profitable SKUs for this specific customer and that specific retailer. So you make that choice, what you want to protect versus how I want to protect. If I can't import from this country, I'll import from that country. Even though that's important and that's quite fundamental, but in the short term, it's more about protecting the business. So which SKUs you're going to prioritize, and it's based on criteria that you define, which is like profitability and so on, and sales and so forth. So this is if it's a short term. If it's more of a long term challenge, a chronic challenge, which is more related to categories that are quite difficult to forecast, either because they're relatively new or because they're seasonal, or consumer behavior just sometimes changes. We don't really understand why. We need to invest more effort in mapping and understanding and root causing these changes. What were the triggers? Is it an overreaction that they want to protect supply short term? So someone's ordering, a spike. Is it an opportunistic opportunity that's probably going to a certain wholesale channel for export that, if you get it to me in 2 weeks' time, I'll take it. Otherwise, the opportunity goes away. We need to understand more what's driving that, and then reflect on it and say, okay, look, this is a strategic thing. I'd like to cover for it in the future. If it keeps happening, so I will invest more in inventory or invest more in, making the supply chain shorter. Or you might say that, look, this is not the kind of business that I want to protect for every time. So I hope I answered the question. I mean, if there's a secret to forecasting, to knowing how to forecast precisely, then we'll all be very, very rich people. But the reality is forecasting is hard. I can't hear you. Can't hear you, Sandy.
Yeah. Hey, sorry guys, I was unmuting myself. You definitely are, and it brings me back to one of the big highlights and one of the themes, which is collaboration. And you in your answer, you talked about how you're speaking together, that you guys are aligning together, that you guys are setting, that you're sharing information, that hey, this is a peak, or hey, actually, we need to build this into the. So alignment and collaboration between you is the key. So effective and openness communication, and doing this out of the world of telephones and post-it notes, right? And doing this in the modern world where we can, we can play with the data together and then come to an alignment on what it is, and then in some kind of a structured process, right? So it also just screams to me S&OP, and aligning within your own organization. So definitely did answer the question. It's always this has actually been a lot of fun. We have run considerable minutes over, but thank you so much for our diehard fans who stood the whole way. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really, I've really enjoyed this. Tariq, thank you so much for your words. Michael, your insight was inspiring, actually. It's inspiring to think that we're thinking of how the customers are interacting, and this is how we need to to prepare for us. And Ziad, that insight into, you know, your experience working with one of the world's giants in the world, you know, that's really, really valuable. So I can imagine that's also a big part of why our people last the last 20 minutes. So I'm going to say thank you very much to all of the speakers. Thank you very much to the attendees. I really enjoyed it, so I hope we get to do this again. But for now, we're going to sign off. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and attendees, have a great rest of your day, evening, wherever you are.